supply, it is a challenge. There are many challenges have been discussed, and I think we discussed it through some workshop, presentations, discussion, and the panelists of the breakout sessions pointed out some recommendations that we have categorized on basic of food supply chain. In the beginning, I will like to put there are 2 or 3 points that there is no food without water, and it is an important and essential issue that we need to think about it. And the other statement that I would like to start with it is we are relying extremely in innovation technology and R&D to find solutions and to restructure our agriculture system according to what have been done in the science. And we will go in the third statement to have science-based solutions and nature-based solutions to be more resilient and more sustainable. So when we look for the recommendations of the panelists, there are 4 categories that we need to think about it: food production system, and there are food processing and marketing, trade, and consumption. And according to these categories, there are more recommendations. So what they start to talk about is to improve crop yield and quality through crop optimization and improve seed variety. And this will enable us to develop using state-of-art technologies, soil and weed management, maybe introducing some innovative technology like digital herbicides, something that is innovative to control the weeds in the agriculture sector without any using of pesticide or chemicals. There are plant handling, health, harvesting technologies, and developing of the waste management of agriculture sector. The other thing is to developing and promoting a startup of control environment agriculture, and to redesign it again to accommodate our condition, our weather condition, not just to customize what is there, but we need to think about new technologies that reshape up our control environment in Saudi Arabia. We know that we will depend on the control environment in a part of our agriculture sector. At least we will go for fruit and vegetable to control system in one or stage of our agriculture sector. So we need to think about retractable greenhouses, a new design of greenhouses, maybe shade houses, cooling system to control the raising up temperature in Saudi Arabia. We need to develop our food system, whether agriculture, livestock, aquaculture, to be more resilient and climate smart, and using precision farming and smart farming, and developing and promoting the safe production food. So we need to use good agricultural practices and develop regulation legislation for such a thing. MEWA developed Saudi GAP, and there are global GAP, there are organic farming. So we need to think about how to help all these quality assurance logos to be used in our system. They recommend to undertake desalination to increase the crop production to better level of self-sufficiency, and We are talking about promoting agroforestry and developing soil health and fertility management system by developing a soil strategy for our country and for Saudi Arabia. Increase production of animal-based products by improving our local breeds and best practice technologies used for animal production is an important issue. And we have a very developed animal production system here in Saudi Arabia from dairy and poultry sector. So we need to think about secure our local breeds in our farm. Modify crop mix for further reduce cultivation of fodder in favor of high value crops, and high value strategic crop is an important issue we need to put it. Data sharing and technology sharing is important, so we need to maybe put digital tools to extension services and capacity building to maybe deliver such thing. And in the end, all these will be promoted by investing more in R&D. This is from food production system. When we go to food processing and marketing, developing food of the future. And this discussion has been thoroughly covered during our 2 days workshop. So sector like plant-based alternative dairy and protein products, culture meat that is lab-grown, insect-based proteins as feed and food, algae protein and fermented proteins, and gas-based proteins is merged production. And the good news here, it's need a very limited source of water. So it could be a secure part of our need for at least our animal feeding. There are better tools to food track and traceability and to ensure that there are healthy food is available for our consumers here. Developing and promoting digital marketplace and electronic marketing platform and educational and training program for capability building in a strategic focus area. In trade, we need to optimize the trade portfolio by regulations, legislation, etc. And then we need to diverse our sources of our strategic crop from the world, and develop food security early warning system and here in Saudi Arabia, and depending upon what is there in the world, as FAO mentioned in their intervention. And there are responsible foreign direct investment to secure part of our strategic food. In consumption, I think there are 2 or 3 points related to our food production, related to our food import, improving dietary intake and to promote health habits. And there are changed consumption patterns. It's very important. We mentioned some of it. It will be covered in the 3rd group. And reducing food loss and waste across the value chain. And it should be reduced in production, in post-harvest, handling, packaging, distribution, and in consumption as well. So we need to think in innovation and research and development to control and reduce food loss and waste. These are the points that come from our discussion yesterday. And thank you very much for your listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Suliman. The chair of the session on water supply has been Professor Matthew McCabe, Matthew, could I ask you please to come to the stage and provide a summary from your work group sessions? Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank the previous speakers, the Vice Minister and Rod and Mark in particular, as well as the summary from our eminent speaker just now, for providing a great platform for some of the points that I'm going to review. Many of the messages have already been heard, so some of these will be reiterated. Food security is water security, is energy security. We cannot separate these elements, and we cannot talk about one without the other. To illustrate this, I want to review one of our favourite subjects, statistics. Saudi is the largest producer and the 6th largest consumer of oil in the world. More than 20% of production is used internally. Around half of that goes towards desalination. In real terms, that's about $200 million per day. Saudi is also the world's largest producer of desalinated water, with around 20% of global capacity. That represents about 70% of the nation's potable water use. Capacity is expected to double over the coming decade. Now, despite this, desalination meets less than 10% of total freshwater consumption. The other 90% comes from groundwater, and most of that is being used in the agricultural sector. Now, in 2020, the gross domestic product of the agricultural sector was around 2.5%. 70 billion SAR compared to about 2.6 trillion SAR. And it employs about the same percentage of people. So why am I recounting all these statistics, bombarding you with numbers? Well, you have to ask the question, viewed through the lens of energy use, of water use and total food production, let alone the economics of the question, is the real cost, forgetting the lost opportunity cost, worth the benefit? Now, if it's not, then we need to rethink the strategy. And if it's not already obvious, all of this is completely unsustainable. Saudi Arabia has pledged to be net zero by 2060. But at the moment, energy use, water use and food consumption are all increasing. They will continue to grow as population grows. For the kingdom to move towards a more sustainable future, some big decisions and some hard decisions need to be made. Well, where do we start? Well, building on Mark's comments, I have some radical and some not so radical thoughts on this. First, we must license water. Just like domestic supply, we must charge an appropriate amount for groundwater. Free water is the problem. We need to determine the real cost. We need to preserve groundwater resources. How much food we produce locally should be dictated by our best estimates of water renewal, which is a small fraction of current use. If we want to maximise food security, we should probably avoid exporting food products, or at least those grown with fresh water. Any exported food product is exporting water. We should identify those essential products that we want to produce locally and then manage the production of those. We should tie a water licence with a food production licence. Cereals and grains grown on centre pivot fields are probably not part of that equation, except for national emergencies. We do need an entire digitisation of our food and water sectors. You cannot manage what you do not measure. And we do not measure. High tech and smart tech has a massive role to play in advancing food security and optimising production. But so too does low tech and dumb tech. Simple measures on the farm and training in best practice represents the lowest hanging fruit and the biggest water savings. Putting a price on water will accelerate the adoption of water-saving practices. We need a diversity of import markets to manage the risks and resilience of supply, not just because of geopolitical issues today, but because climate changes and impacts are going to affect food regions around the world. We must think global to act local. So I will end where I started. Food security is water security, is energy security. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Matthew. The chair of the Food Use Working Groups is Dr. Majid Al-Khalaf. Dr. Majid, could you please come to the stage and provide us with a very quick summary? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much for the previous speaker. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For 3 days, and actually it is for 2 months, preparing for this workshop, we have a great actually team working on preparation for this excellent, precious workshop. We have discussed within 3 days. And before that, I would like to thank Professor Mark Tester online for his starting working with us within 2 months and more. Also, Paul Dalby, also Professor Weng, all the preparation teams, and especially for Rebecca for meeting several times in preparation for this workshop. We have discussed within these 3 days several challenges regarding food use in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and also the solutions for these challenges, inshallah, will be implemented to solve these challenges. We have discussed several challenges. The first one was the data sharing between government agencies and also the private sector. Also, the absence of a healthy food environment inside the workplace and also schools and in the general shops in Saudi Arabia. Some implemented initiatives being done, but should be on the national level. Also, we discussed the trade challenges with other countries regarding the nutritious food and also food safety. Also, we have discussed with our colleagues about the absence of harmonization on some government projects, which should be unified in a unified methodologies, especially with R&Ds. Also, we have discussed about 80% of food, our food being imported from outside Saudi Arabia. So, which should be actually, we should depend on our food production supply in Saudi Arabia. Also, we have discussed about the absence of the infrastructure for data collection, especially for epidemiological studies, food intake and food consumption studies, Also, we've discussed the compliance on lifestyle changes, especially with food waste, changing the lifestyle and food intake, and also the lifestyle on food segregation or waste segregation between organic and solid waste. Also, the compliance regarding the changing in the perception of Saudi population regarding the generosity of some providing a huge amount of food for some festive and some events. We've discussed the fidelity and evaluation of awareness programs in Saudi Arabia, especially for food waste, nutrition, and also food safety. We come up with some solutions regarding these, regarding the food use or food utilization underneath food safety, nutrition, and food waste. The first solution, setting a national research and priority by using a systematic approach in one of the key nodal points in the strategic direction of research in Saudi Arabia, and what will provide a roadmap to advance the research agency's mission. The second one, strengthening stakeholder engagement and risk communication, since food safety and nutrition is a shared responsibility, and it is required a joint effort by all stakeholders in food system. Successfully ensuring food safety and quality from farm to fork requires a more inclusive approach with all stakeholders, including empowered consumers. The third one, transparency in sharing data and collaboration of integration data between different authorities must be achieved in all over food chain. The fourth, public-private partnerships, PPPs, for public health have gained a great attention in the last decade. Also, there is an interest from community in Saudi Arabia to access the healthy, nutritious, affordable, and safe food. So the development and use of PPPs in the area will be worth it. The fifth one, building a strong policy and regulatory framework that updated periodically in response to any health risks, establish a harmonized and risk-based framework of food legislation. Sixth, development of one health monitoring and development of one health monitoring and surveillance systems that should cover microbial, chemical hazards, antimicrobial resistance, that also require collaboration from all related authorities. Seventh, the food safety systems must be transformed from reactive to proactive systems, especially when addressing health risks emerging at a human-animal ecosystems interface. Eighth, effective measurement of the occurrence and magnitude of diseases and health-related concerns affecting the Saudi population linked to food use that are not limited to food outbreaks, in order to perform targeted prioritization for food safety, nutrition, food waste improvement, and building successful food use system. Ninth, believing that valid assessment of a nutrition situation is the foundation on which effectiveness interventions can be built to improve nutrition status of the community in Saudi Arabia. All agencies shall cooperate fully to fulfill this goal. 10th, nutrition education is a vital part of a comprehensive health education program and empowers the students with knowledge and skills to make healthy food and beverages choices. For these reasons, it is important to embedding nutrition subject into existing curriculum of foods and schools and universities. 11th, nutritional awareness programs are one of the key factors that can affect individuals' lifestyle changes, but the mechanisms can be interact to transforming the knowledge into dietary behaviors. In this regard, it's recommended to improve the quality of nutritional awareness programs design by using different types of evidence-based interventions. Example, applying behavior change techniques rather than traditional ways. It's also recommended to strengthen national and local systems through upstream policy work, develop strategies and plans, and improve dissemination and use of evaluations. The last point, 12, incentivizing public and private to deploy waste segregation at source to enable valorization of waste, closing the loop of circular economy and producing a higher value organic agricultural products. The last message that we want to highlight today is that food utilization is a shared responsibility, and it requires a joint effort by all stakeholders, including consumers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Majid. And to provide us with a summary of the Environmental Change and Saudi Green Initiative Working Group, welcome to the stage Her Highness Princess Mashael Al-Shalan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'll try to be brief as I walk you through the invaluable outcomes of 2 very eventful days. I guess as the chair of what's now called on the screen the climate change, I'm glad to see that change, an SGI stream, I find no better way to begin than to remind us of Mark Tester's opening comments on day 1 of the workshop. Produce as much locally as makes sense in line with ESG metrics. So what did we do over the past 2 days? We first looked at the need to further our understanding of the climate models at the Saudi scale, equally looked at the threats to supply chains like climate change conflict and the need to measure what we manage, like we were reminded by Professor McCabe, with the creation of relevant indicators based on transparent and publicly available data. My colleagues all mentioned the need for data is there, but I find that sometimes we treat it as gold. Let's all try to treat it as a public gold or a public resource, as opposed to some things that even intra-governmental agencies we find one office hides from the other. There's equally a need to evolve our models from extraordinary agreements of our planet that's extractionary and that's essentially hurting our planet and we're no longer operating within our boundaries, to one that values public-planet partnerships. In Saudi, I think, we have an opportunity to go beyond that with all of these amazing visions that were stated in the SGI. So we were equally reminded of the opportunity that bold, ambitious targets, like those of the SGI and the MGI, present. So what are the solutions? That was essentially the culmination of day 2. Or what I see essentially is the seeds of better solutions. One of our postdocs in the sessions reminded us yesterday of a saying in Arabic that says, Al-Haja al-Ikhtira', need is the mother of invention. Where need is what initiates innovation, we need sincere efforts and collaborations to make said innovations prosper and actually benefit everyone. First, within the boundaries of our kingdom, because I think that that's where our responsibility lies, but I think that we have the opportunity to actually influence things well beyond that. So some of these solutions included ecosystem interventions to ensure successful commercialization of homegrown technologies. Some that could be considered could be among the lines of the deployment of procurement conditionalities that are quite in line with the SGI targets, as well as standards that allow us to operate within that model. I think maybe sometimes these could be easier to deploy when we have other considerations on the pocket of the layman in Saudi Arabia, and hopefully this will help have a multitude of win-win-wins in terms of situations, specifically since there's equally a value in the SGI targets that's associated with carbon and carbon management. And dare I say, with the MGI targets, we have the potential to have, with those kinds of smart policies, ones that have impact and influence regionally, if not globally. We equally have the opportunity to capitalize on the diversity of native plants. So while I'm not a plant engineer like our brilliant Rebecca, who's been tasked with a lot of things that I consider are as important, you're planting the right kind of seeds, hopefully for better outcomes for tomorrow. So things that range from risks around bananas, corn, my favorite drink every day, the coffee. We need to start thinking of ways of diversifying local crops grown, and how could that role have a positive impact on food security supply on a global level. There's equally the reminder from Professor Rod of the need for educational program, and the way that I phrased it yesterday was for sustained educational program. So while it might start in the kindergarten and in pre-K, we need to be thinking of things that go from cradle to grave, things that equally remind us beyond the edible schoolyard project that is extremely important, or the free lunch that was proposed yesterday, things that actually impact and influence and remind us of our culture and why we valued the homegrown garden. It's not for food security, I can assure you that. I think we can live maybe for a day or two happily on figs, or maybe rumman among other local crops, but that would not be the solution to solve it. But I think getting our fingers in the soil reminds us of the value that's associated beyond what could be bought at the shelves. And last but definitely not least is food production and ecosystem rehabilitation interventions need to be valuing natural resources. And natural resources, I think, something that Professor McCabe reminded us of today, there's equally the importance of the soil, yes, the water, but energy. We take energy for granted because we're an energy producing country. We have so much of it that we tend to devalue all of the risks and labor associated with the extraction of said value. So what we can do is to remind ourselves equally of our shared ancestral global goals. We could leverage that for innovations in greenhouses and effective and efficient water use, widespread composting, and mindfully influencing consumption habits in line with our own culture, and rehabilitating our ecosystems in inclusion of rangelands and finding novel ways of preventing overgrazing. So again, things that work with the layman that owns the camels, that owns all of these grazers. You cannot have a disconnect where you're speaking within one realm and then not having the right kind of influence or impact in the longer run. So some final reflections from my side. I think it's worthy to remind myself, and all of you included, first to account for unknowns and, more importantly, for unknowables. These are pretty hard to hedge against, so this takes me to my second point, is climate change's multiplier effect. So while we will not fully understanding the dynamics on the local ground, how these might impact or directly affect our operations, or at least its implications, the risks are of a scale that we need to seriously hedge against it. So that this is a hedging exercise in essence. And last but not least, I definitely see myself, hopefully, and all of you that are attracted to institutions like this, the disproportionate role that Saudi Arabia can play as a responsible actor globally. While we value homegrown research in the sciences and basic and applied, and we highly value all of the efforts of KAUST in that regard, we see the opportunity for us to influence the global trends, given all of our sets of endowments, our opportunities, our very ambitious goals and targets, and we'll be hearing a lot today from the giga projects and what they could be unlocking in terms of potential, and hopefully all of the brilliant Saudi minds and foreign brethren that are helping us achieve those goals. But the influence should most definitely not be underestimated that we could have in this realm. So with that, I thank you, and hopefully we look forward to a very fruitful discussion through the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Princess Mashael. We are now going to have a break. We will be back here at 11:30. The next few sessions are to engage with some of the agencies and organisations who may be able to help in the delivery of some of the ideas that we have come up with over the last 2 days. So we will start with government and the Giga projects, and then we will, after lunch, talk to corporations and startups. So enjoy your morning tea break, and we'll see you back here at 11:30 to start the next session.